Welcome to Intentionality with Paul Kempf, the podcast where we explore the possibilities and opportunities that can be created by a more intentional life. If you like what you hear, if you like what you see, subscribe on the different channels. Please share the links to this podcast on social media with your friends and family so we could impact more lives. This is episode 13. I've been promising to give you some tools that you could utilize in your life to become more intentional. These are tools that are very personal to me, tools that I have been using in my life to become more intentional, tools I use on a daily basis, tools that have helped me immeasurably to achieve the success I have and to have a more satisfying life. Now, these tools work for me. These tools might not all work for you. The trick here will be to take one or two of these tools, to see which ones work for you, to try them out for a few days, and then, very importantly, try and see if you can make a habit out of these tools. We've spoken before about the power of habits and how a good habit can have a very constructive influence in your life. And how bad habits, obviously, can have a very destructive influence in your life. The trick here would be to take these 10 habits or some of these 10 habits and to create constructive habits in your life. So let's go through them. The first habit for me is one you could have probably guessed. It's a pretty obvious one. It's the habit of reading. I believe the habit of reading is an incredibly important part of living an intentional life. Reading anything, fiction, non-fiction. Yes, there's even a substantial benefit in reading fiction, aside from the relaxation that you can get out of it. People that read fiction are normally people that write better, that spell better, that are able to use grammar better. So there's an obvious benefit that you get out of reading fiction. But the more important one for me is the non-fiction reading, where you can read things that can help you develop certain skills, that can help you to do your job better. Reading for personal development, for personal growth. There's so much out there to read. And it is incredibly beneficial, especially if you want to live a more intentional life. So habit number one, tool number one, is reading. The second one is very closely related to reading. And it's something that developed with technology. 100 years ago, I'm sure all of our knowledge that we got in life came from books. These days, a lot of knowledge is consumed through podcasts and YouTube videos. It's a great source of information. It's a great source of learning. And I would encourage you to spend more time on listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos. Now, be careful of doing it just for the entertainment value that you can get out of it. Of course, there's entertainment in it. The important thing would be to spend time on these podcasts and YouTube videos that help you to develop yourself, to help you grow, to help you to become more intentional. The third tool is a very important one to me, one that I'm pretty passionate about in my life. We've spoken before about the fact that we all just have 24 hours in the day. You can't create more hours in a day. The important part is how you utilize those hours. And that's why this third tool is so important for me. It's called the 5 a.m. Club. It's something that was coined by Robin Sharma. He wrote a book about it. There's a shorter YouTube video that you can go and watch if you want the gist of it, if you want to know what the 5 a.m. Club is about. But the long and short of it is really this. Get up every single morning of your life at 5 a.m. This creates an incredible opportunity to do the things that you want to do every day, to become more intentional in more aspects of your life. I love those first few hours in the day, getting up at 5 a.m., having the time, but very importantly also the quiet, to do the things that I want to do every day. It's a time when you're not disturbed by phone calls, you're not disturbed by emails, and you can really get focused on what it is that you want to achieve for that day. It's a great time of the day for planning as well. Now, I've been trying the 5 a.m. club thing for quite a while now, getting up every single morning at 5 o'clock. And the interesting thing that happened to me in the last year is I started finding that the 5 a.m. club was not quite enough. So I've decided to start my own club. I call it the 4:30 a.m. club. Not very original, but something that I've tried doing to create more time in the mornings for the things that I want to do, for the things that I want to be more intentional about in my life. Now, one thing you have to be careful of is you still need sleep. Sleep is an incredibly important part of your physical well-being. So the one consequence of getting up at 5 or even at 4:30 in the mornings is you need to see to it that you get to bed quite early. And that is something that I do, luckily, on a regular basis. So try out the 5 a.m. club or even the 4:30 a.m. club. It's something that really works for me. The next tool that I utilize in my life is to-do lists. Now, I'm pretty sure most of you not only knows what a to-do list is, but you utilize it in your life. But here's where I think it can become a tool for intentionality in your life. It's when you take a to-do list and you put it on steroids. So what do I mean by that? Firstly, I use an app for my to-do lists. It's an app called Todoist. And every single aspect of my life features on Todoist, where there are lists for specific aspects in my life that I want to be more intentional about. For example, a to-do list for work. Now, what's very important about the to-do list for work is it's something I spend time on every morning. When I get up at 5 a.m. or at 4:30, I spend time on making sure that on my to-do list, I prioritize what it is that I want to achieve for that day. I use the matrix of urgent and important to determine the things that I have to get done that day. And those are obviously the things that are right on top of my to-do list. But then I also have other to-do lists, things like personal development. I use my Todoist app to make lists of big hags that I still want to achieve, big, hairy, audacious goals. My bucket list is a list that I have on Todoist. There's a gratitude list. These lists are things that help to keep me focused on living a more intentional life. The fifth tool that I want to talk about is journaling. Now, this is something that I've only recently discovered. It's not something that I really thought would have an impact on my life, but it's been fascinating how big an impact it actually has had on my life in the last year that I've started journaling. So the secret for me behind journaling is when things go wrong. When you do something in your life that's maybe not as intentional as you want it to be. When you do something that you didn't really want to do, like lose your temper, feel an emotion that you don't think fits in with your life. That's when it becomes very valuable to go to a journal, to write down what you're feeling, to write down your thoughts, your emotions around what happened. Because inevitably what happens is the next day when you go back to that journal to journal again, you glance at the things that you've written the day before, and you get reminded of the things that went wrong, the things that you can do better in life, the things that you can be more intentional about. So journaling, to me, a very valuable tool in terms of living a more intentional life. The seventh tool that I want to tell you about is one that I haven't heard a lot of other people use. I think this is one that's pretty personal to me. My seventh tool that I use is personal challenges. For these personal challenges, I use a spreadsheet. I've spoken before about spreadsheets and my OCD tendencies around spreadsheets, but this is what works for me. So on the left-hand side of this personal challenge spreadsheet, I simply put the date. At the top of the spreadsheet, I put 15 things that I want to do every single day. 15 things that if I do these things, it'll make me more intentional. Now, every single day, I try and achieve as many of these 15 things that I can. I sit in the mornings when I get up early, and I give myself a point for each of these columns. How did I do on these 15 things on the previous day? Obviously, every day I try and get to 15. It's rare for that to happen, but I try and see every day how many of those 15 aspects of my life that I try and be more intentional about, I actually achieve. So that's how I use personal challenges as a tool to be more intentional. The next one is a short and sweet one, but an important one. It's saying yes more often in your life. Saying yes more often in your life can be dangerous. The important part here is saying yes to the right things. Saying yes to things that challenge you. Saying yes to things in your life that help you to grow, that help you to develop. The obvious next one, the eighth one, is saying no more. Now, this does sound like a contradiction. The important thing to remember is to say yes to the things that help you, that develop you, that challenge you, and say no to the things that are wasting your time, the things that are wasting your effort in life. And not just things, very importantly, people that are distracting you from living a more intentional life. The ninth one I use is mentoring. To me, mentoring is a very powerful tool. And here's the secret behind mentoring. If you are fortunate enough, privileged enough to find yourself at a point in your life where you start mentoring other people, either in a business environment or in a personal environment, the benefit of mentoring is when you sit in front of somebody and you tell them to do something in their life in a very specific way because you believe that will be beneficial to them. It forces you to be honest with yourself. It forces you to be accountable to yourself and to ask the question, if this is the advice you're giving to somebody else, are you being intentional with that specific thing in your own life? Mentoring to me is a very valuable tool in keeping me honest about the intentionality level that I have in my life. And the last one is gamification. Now, this does sound like a weird one to keep on the list or to put on the list, but just hear me out. Here's where gamification really works for me. There are certain apps that I utilize in my life where gamification actually motivates me to do things. Now, the one obvious example of this is the Discovery app. They have a system where you have to do a certain amount of steps in a week. And if you achieve those steps, you get a reward. Now, the reward is small. It's not something important. It's not something big. The more important part about the gamification around that is you build up a streak. Now, if you, for a week, have achieved a certain amount of steps, and the next week you don't achieve those steps, not really a problem. But it starts getting interesting, and this is where the gamification comes in. When you've built up a streak of 50 weeks, of 100 weeks, where for 2 years in a row there hasn't been a single week where you missed your steps, all of a sudden that becomes a huge motivating factor in getting you to get up off the couch and go and do the exercise that you have to do. And there are many other examples of this where gamification is utilized to help you to be more successful, to be more intentional, to do the things that you want to do. And it's one of the things that Louis Neal also spoke about in our previous podcast when he spoke about Booked and how they use gamification in the Booked app to encourage people to read. So those are the 10 tools that I use. There is one more that should probably be on this list. I've heard many times before about the value of this last tool in terms of being more intentional in your life, and that's meditation. The only reason why it's not on my list is I told you this was my list that is very personal to me, and I'm struggling with meditation. It's something that I'm trying. It's something that I'm trying to use more in my life, but it's something that I've not quite seen the benefit of yet. So for now, I have not put meditation on my list of 10 tools to help me have or live a more intentional life. So we're almost at the end of this episode, and I want to just expand on this idea of using certain tools to have a more intentional life, to build habits around these tools towards a more intentional life. And I found a beautiful quote that's attributed to a guy called Todd Henry. And I'm going to read the quote to you because I think it's very appropriate at this point in the episode. The quote says, "No one charts a course to mediocrity, yet it is a destination of choice for so many people. It's chosen in small ways over time, and these tiny, seemingly inconsequential decisions accumulate and eventually results in a state of crisis." Everything is about accumulation. Good habits, bad habits. This reminds me of that favorite word of mine that I've used before, that I've told you about before. Accretion. The process of building a life layer by small layer. Accumulation of good habits, accretion of good habits. And speaking of favorite words, I've taken this quote of Todd Henry and I've changed it slightly. My question that I have for you today to think about this week is, what if these tiny, seemingly inconsequential decisions that we make every day, that accumulate over time, can be better decisions? What if these decisions can be more intentional? And instead of charting a course to a life of mediocrity, we can start charting a course to success, to excellence, to thriving, to a more intentional life. So, for my tip of the week, I've chosen to go back to The Daily Stoic. I told you about this book around Stoicism written by Ryan Holiday. I think it was in episode 5 of this podcast already. There's a specific section in this book, The Daily Stoic, which is very applicable, very relevant to the topic that I'm discussing today. And I'm going to read to you that small little excerpt from this book. It is entitled The Chain Method, and it's attributed to Epictetus, one of the famous Stoics. And he said, "If you don't wish to be a hothead, don't feed your habit. Try as a first step to remain calm and count the days you haven't been angry. I used to be angry every day, now every other day, then every third or fourth. The moment you make it to 30 days, thank God, for habit is first weakened and then obliterated." Thank you to everyone that's supporting this podcast. Thank you for all the hard efforts behind the scenes that sometimes go unnoticed. Thank you for FFG for continuing to support this podcast and helping me build something that can create lasting memories on this journey. If you want to get a hold of me, please send an email to paul@iwpk.co.za. Congratulations on making the choice to live a more intentional life, to be the architect of your success. Have a wonderful, intentional week. Thank you.